Hello there. We are watching Ruby Spears' Superman. Original air date 9/17/88. Wow, they're really using the traditional, more powerful than a locomotive speech here. Really introducing him, the classic lines. Very similar to the George Reeves show. People kind of forgot about this series. It's been sought after by Superman fans a lot. It was produced by Ruby Spears using the character designs by Jose Luis Garcia Lopez from the DC Style Guide. The show was produced a year after the disastrous Superman 4, and it came on about 2 years really after John Byrne did his post-crisis reboot. Here we get the love theme from the first film, an homage here to Christopher Reeve and Margot Kidder. I'm often amazed at how the hand-drawn animation can do the S on the cape, but the modern animation cannot. Okay, here we get the inciting incident here. Now, I've always said that you should write Superman kind of like you would write a vampire or a werewolf. Now, let me explain. With a vampire or a werewolf, you have to give the rules. What are the abilities? Where do they come from? What are the weaknesses? And in this episode, I think they cover most of that pretty well. We see a good cross-section of his powers, and we get at least one major Superman weakness shown. Okay, here we get smart Superman. He is strategically intelligent, something that I believe has been lost since 1986. Every time I pick up a Superman comic book now, it's very rare that I get the idea that he's really strategically smart. Usually he has to act dumb, I guess, to make Batman look like a genius. They also make Superman not as emotionally well-rounded as they used to, I guess to contrast with Batman being an asshole. Here we get Lois, and she's a bit of a thrill seeker, but then she needs help suddenly. I'm always amazed. Whenever they do Lois in animation, they always have to put her in a skirt. And she's kind of like an action heroine. She's always in something heroine. She's always described as being an action-oriented reporter for a newspaper, so why is she in a skirt all the time? Here we get the Luthor mansion. I love the location. It's right in the middle of town. Very Iron Man. The design for Lex was made into a Toy Biz action figure, the infamous action figure that would punch itself in the head. I had it. Ms. Morganberry based on Ms. Tessmacher. She looks like a cleaning lady crossed with a Playboy Playmate. That would have been an interesting one ad. Here we get Lex as the businessman like in the John Byrne reboot, but he has the intelligence of the pre-crisis Lex. Jennifer Morganberry, or was it Jessica? I think I missed it. And here we get the weakness. You have to tell us what the weakness is. The idea of a kryptonite ring came from John Byrne in the book. It ate his hand off. During the John Byrne reboot, they got rid of all the isotopes of kryptonite, thinking they were stupid. And they kept the green isotope, however. I never got the idea of saying you have to make the character less powerful, so let's take away his weaknesses, essentially. Take away his weakness to red, gold, and so forth kryptonite by just taking those weaknesses away. I thought it was kind of a contradiction. He strikes me as a happier Eric Raymond. A very happy Eric Raymond from Gem. That's what Lex is. The Ruby Spears art direction here with big-ass computers and machines. I don't think it was ever an aesthetic better than what Filmation did. Certainly more functional, certainly better than what Hanna-Barbera traditionally did. Here we get Centennial Park and Metropolis. They don't really play with a set location for Metropolis much here, as you'll see later. Prior to the John Byrne reboot, Metropolis was in Delaware, on the Delaware Bay, right across from Gotham City, New Jersey. If that were the case, that statue would probably be, I don't know, a Confederate soldier, even though Delaware was a Union slave state. 1980s punks. Still a very overused cliche. I can't help but think these Defendroids are based on the robot from RoboCop. They just kind of have that same shape. Get some good old-fashioned Lex Luthor camp here, like you would in the Silver Age, and like you would on the early episodes of Superboy. Superboy was also on TV at this time. It debuted in October 1988. 88 is when I turned 10 years old, and let me tell you, it was a great time to be a Superman fan. As far as I was concerned, the whole show was a sequel to Superpowers Team Galactic Guardians. I mean, it kind of looked like it, kind of felt like it. Of course, the final episode, when they show a flashback of him debuting as Superman, never having been Superboy, it kind of muddles it for me, but for the most part, I interpret it as set in the same world as the final 2 seasons of Super Friends. The idea of robots taking over Superman's job, I think that has been used more than once. I think it was used at least twice in the comic books. I do think it was a trope used on the DCAU Superman. Speaking of the DCAU, I really enjoy Beau's vocal performance here much better than Tim Daly or even George Newburn's. I think I'm starting to enjoy it more than Danny Dark's. Lex has hired actors, just like a certain campaign did for the 2000 recount protest. Daily Bugle. Lois is very surprised here at the headline. I mean, she works at the damn paper. Yeah, the Daily Bugle reference is a reference to Spider-Man. I can't really take the Perry White in this one very seriously. He just sounds too much like Grodd and Brainiac. He's basically performed by the same actor from the Super Friends, Grodd and Brainiac characters. I don't know, it just doesn't match Perry. And here we get an odd sort of location for Metropolis. You can't really place it. You have a lot of greenery here that later looks like it's in the desert. They're setting up a reference to Superman the movie, where Lois's car goes into the ravine. If you're going to modernize Jimmy Olsen, go all the way. I can't see anyone dressing like that on a skateboard. It is so awkward. I've often said it before, but Superman's supporting cast, it's like they're stuck in the 50s. It's kind of like an old Archie comic. Lois and Jimmy and Perry, they're just kind of stuck there. They just go for exposition. They don't really do much. I don't think they've ever done that much, really, with the exception of modern Lois in the comic books. They try to do something with Jimmy every once in a while, but they don't get far doing that. Yep, here we go. Old school Jimmy had his own book, great stories, great solo stuff, but modern DC kind of squanders the opportunity. No sooner than you do something with the Superman characters, the supporting cast, I mean, then you backtrack. Okay, that's like a gem cliffhanger there. And once again, they always put Lois in a skirt or a dress in these. Like you would imagine if she's a very, adventurous reporter, she would be wearing like pants and a jacket or something. I'm very surprised Ruby Spears did that because, Goldie Gold, kind of the incompetent version of Lois Lane on Goldie Gold and Action Jack, she had pants. Okay, here comes a moment where I just rolled my eyes even as a child. The lava would have killed Clark by now, but okay, a piece of a bomb. And the cape with a pocket in it, just like in the pre-Byrne era. Again, Superman is a detective in his own right. He is an investigative reporter. So I never see him as being, at all inferior at reading people when compared to Batman. If anything, he's better at reading people. He can hear your heartbeat and see if it skips. Here, Lois is being intelligent instead of just an asshole. I'm really liking the blend of post-crisis and pre-crisis elements here. I mean, you've got Lex Luthor, the businessman, but you still have his high-tech schemes. You have the classic relationship between Superman and Lois and the classic Clark Kent, but you don't have an overt reference to Krypton, just like in the post-crisis, the post-Byrne era. They kind of just put Krypton on the back burner. Lois apparently can pilot a helicopter. I think Jimmy Olsen just peed himself. And a reference to Superman the movie. Did they just jump? Okay, they had a parachute. Well, that makes sense. Okay, we went from daytime to nighttime here. Nowadays, they have to explain why they write Superman as such a dumbass, claiming that Kryptonians are hardwired to be overconfident. That's been referenced more than once in the last 15 years. I like how the power and his vulnerability and his invulnerability, how everything is very consistent so far. He's not struggling to lift a car and then easily lifting a building. Inconsistency in his power set has been something that every era of comic books has showcased. Okay, I like the idea here of the armored train. That'd be a cool play set. Every scene here so far has been appropriately set up. They just set up what the armored car on the train is made out of. So that tells you exactly how badass these robots are and what obstacles Superman will face later. I get the feeling Lex kind of fancies himself like Ozymandias from Watchmen. A good rationalization for why Lex does what he does. A smart move. They just don't have Superman try to push back against the force beams like they later would in DCAU. I think if you had the DCAU approach to polishing the episode script, you would have had a perfect Superman animated series here. I really do. In terms of the writing quality. Pretty good art direction by Ruby Spears with the design of the train and the robots and everything. I always kind of figured out like whose art direction do I like more in old school cartoons? Do I like Filmation? Do I like Ruby Spears? It's really an apple and an orange for me. I think Filmation did better extraterrestrial aesthetic, and I think Ruby Spears did a better terrestrial aesthetic, contemporary aesthetic, if that makes any sense. And Lex is setting up his alibi. And Superman is smart enough to figure out a computer. I like the Lex Luthor camp a lot. And here we go, the classic Superman pays him a visit and does something to unnerve him. I really think it got started here because we saw it already in the Lois and Clark commentary when we watched the pilot to that. The balcony here kind of looks like Superman 4. Lex explains his cover, kind of like a reverse Columbo explaining the crime. I don't think Lex does not know who his enemy is here. He doesn't. He's an investigative reporter, Clark. Marv Wolfman, a Superman writer, doing the Superman Family Album segment. These were great because, again, this was post-crisis, so we're not dealing with his alien heritage that much. We're dealing with his early years. And I think these are really cute segments. It shows you how he basically got raised. The orphanage segment here is pretty much Golden Age Superman, because in that one, the unnamed farm family or farm couple that found him put him in an orphanage, and it was implied in Action Comics #1 he grew up in an orphanage. I think in the Silver Age, they took him to an orphanage, and then they adopted him from there, so it's nice and legal and explained. Because originally they were too old to pass him off as their own. Post-crisis, they were young enough when they found him. They found him right before being snowed in. 6 months, and people just assumed that he was their biological child. I like how this story, if Superman's around 30, then this story would have taken place in 1958. And we have a 1980s looking person here, the lady that just fainted. Oops. Superman being a little mischievous brat. The idea of Superman having a sneaky, tricky, mischievous, fun-loving mentality really comes in handy when he battles, say, Mr. Mxyzptlk, or when he plays a prank on people who bully him. Oh my god, a lion. I love it. My only question is how these people never put two and two together that, oh my god, this kid's got powers. Isn't somebody going to gossip? Or say, hey, Superman looks like that baby that we adopted to the Kents. I don't trust the guy in the cap. It's very cute. There used to be super baby adventures in the old Superman comic books. They were adorable. Aww. This is what the movies are missing. They're really missing something like that. Why can't you just make Superman, cool or charming? Make his upbringing cute. He's a fun character. He's a fun character. He can use his powers to get a steak done really fast, and maybe he'll overcook it. The Kents don't seem to age between the present day and the flashbacks here, so I'm going to say they're probably 50 and then they're 80 later. Oh, that is so adorable. I'm sorry, I just love it. It's so adorable. Aww. I'm Johnny DC, and I'll be here again for episode 2. I'm going through every single episode.